Hello and welcome to Sunrise Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist Aaron Goldstein, better known as Crease Collector. So just to kick things off for this episode, we wanted to quickly review a couple of products that released during this past week. So starting off with 2019-20 Upper Deck Premier, which released on Wednesday, October 7th. Premier is always a product that a lot of people look forward to just because it's definitely one of the first kind of, no pun intended, but premier products of the year that really offer a lot of high-end content. Of course, some of the returning staple content for this year include the acetate rookie patch autos, the mega patches, and the retro super rookies auto patches as well. And those have been recurring inserts throughout Premier pretty much ever since it came back in 2014-15, and those three subsets are always very much anticipated and highly collected. So as always, great to see those make a return, and those have been done very well again this year. As far as some notable new content this year, there's been a couple of retro-themed additions this year in the 2003-04 Retro Plexi Autos that just mimic the 03-04 Premier Collection signature autograph cards. They actually had those cards last year. There were actual cardboard cards, whereas this year they made them a thick acetate stock that kind of feels and looks like plexiglass. So that's definitely been a pretty well-received new insert. And then as well, they also have included 2002-03 retro jerseys and patches that, as the name would indicate, mimic the jersey and patch design from the 2002-03 Premier Collection release. And those cards back in the day were definitely very desirable and sought after and well collected cards. So it's just cool to see those cards, make a return with that pretty memorable design. Personally, I really like that design, and I think it's just cool to see it come back and have it be with the new players. So definitely like that addition. And then two other notable new additions to the product are the acetate rookie autograph cards, which primarily come in the form of horizontal rookie autos. So just kind of a unique little addition there to add some more rookie autograph content, as well as memorable premieres memorabilia cards, which come in both jersey and patch versions. And those cards just go back to highlighting a player's debut in the league if they had a very memorable debut. For example, something like Austin Matthews' 4-goal NHL debut game, is commemorated within this subset. So just some analysis on the product as a whole. Like I said earlier, I think the acetate RPAs this year look really nice, as they pretty much always have. I think Upper Deck did a really nice job on the design of those, just having them look and feel really clean. They pretty much always have, but I think there was a pretty good emphasis on having them look really clean this year, and I think that just works really well for those cards. Additionally, I like the design used on the mega patches, specifically because Upper Deck is using each team's color as an accent in the design. So the colors on each card vary based on what team the player is on. So I think that just helps make the card look nicer for each specific player instead of just having one specific color scheme that's used across the board. We've talked about that idea in the past, but it's nice to see that done and utilized on really highly sought after cards like the mega patches. And I think even though the patches on the mega patch cards this year are slightly smaller than they have been in the past, I think in a way that the design actually kind of helps make up for that a little bit. I think people would still probably prefer to see the patches be as large as they possibly could be for those cards. But yeah, I still think as a whole that the mega patch cards are definitely a plus. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I really do like the retro additions to the product this year. I'm generally not a huge proponent of the retro inserts. And we've talked about that in previous episodes, but I think these two specific subsets, bringing them back, I think just makes a lot of sense. And I think they really do go well with the product, and it is a very nice nod to the product's history. And, those two specific designs, like I mentioned earlier, were just very highly sought after back in the day. So to see them brought back pretty much in the exact same fashion for the 0203 memorabilia cards, you know, is nice. But then to see the 0304 retro plexi autos just done in a different way, I think is actually even better, you know, to say, okay, you know, this is the same design, but we're changing it, you know, as far as the construction of the card to make it something new and unique while still giving it that nod to the past. I think that was just a really nice way of doing it. And I was very excited to see how those cards would come out, and just seeing some pictures and video of those cards being pulled. They look fantastic. And I know I definitely want to pick up one of those, you know, probably Kirby Doc if I can find one of those for a fair value. But yeah, I think Upper Deck did a really nice job on those cards. I always like Premier. I think it's been a really strong product ever since Upper Deck brought it back in 14-15. And I think this year's, you know, more of the same, just a very well done release, and definitely offering a very strong selection of cards to collectors. Aaron, is there anything else you would want to add about 1920 Premier?
Nothing that you've already haven't said. I think Premiere is already a really solid product that has been since they did bring it back, like you alluded to just now. It's always been really solid. The mega patches, although the design has been slightly tweaked, I feel like they're still gonna, like, it won't hinder the sales. I've already seen a bunch of collectors go nuts for those already. So another big chase for a lot of collectors out there are those mega patches. And I see that continuing as well with this release. So the retro editions are always fun to see, especially having that cards that pull you back into the past, especially with Premiere back in the early 2000s. So to see those cards come back is really nice as well. So definitely another solid product for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other note with the mega patches, I was pretty confident prior to the checklist being released that Jacob Slavin very well might be included in the mega patches this year, just because I know Upper Deck has one of his jerseys and they included him in the SP Authentic limited auto patch set. So I was a little nervous thinking that he might be included in the mega patch checklist, whether that be the chest logo or the sleeve number. I knew it wouldn't be the shoulder patch because they use the shoulder patches quite a lot for those SPA limited auto patches. So I knew that wouldn't really be an option. But yeah, I was definitely a little nervous that that he would be on the mega patch checklist. So even though it's kind of, you know, disappointing that at least for now I won't be able to have a Slavin mega patch in my collection, you know, my wallet is at the very least grateful. So
Yeah, especially for those sleeve numbers. Obviously being limited to, I think all of them would be out of 4, I believe. I think it depends on the number, of course, of the player. But yeah, those are always fun to see collectors try and put those together. And definitely, yeah, they go for a pretty penny. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse that he's not in there. You know, it doesn't do your collection much good, but your wallet's going to thank you for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I think this year they're actually doing the sleeve numbers out of 6, from what I've seen.
Okay.
Anyone that has 2 numbers in their jersey number, obviously. Any guys that are single numbered, they're obviously not doing 6 for that. But yeah, from what I've seen, they've been out of 6, which, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's a way to get more cards in the product, but I would probably like to see them just stay as being out of 4. I think it's doable to do it that way. So, and I think the patches themselves are just more interesting if it's primarily patch on a swatch instead of just, you know, maybe half and half jersey or patch. But yeah, I mean, if you're a player collector and you're not set on trying to complete the whole patch and you just want one of them, then obviously if it's out of 6 instead of out of 4, it's going to be easier for you to find one. So that's a nice upside of having a higher print run as well. Yeah, and then just transitioning to 2020 Upper Deck Team Canada Juniors, which also released on Wednesday, October 7th. Definitely a very anticipated product each year, especially up in Canada, of course. It's a pretty simple product, but I think, you know, it's a very well-received product, and I think a lot of collectors really do enjoy it and look forward to it each year just because of, you know, it being a pretty unique product in the grand scheme of things, and really just focusing on that international component. So of course, as always, with the returning staple content for the product, probably the biggest thing would be those auto patch cards in the product. You know, that's really been the highlight of the product pretty much ever since the get-go back in, I believe, Was 2015 the first year, or 2014? I can't remember.
I think I want to say 2015,
Okay.
but it could have been 14, 15.
Yeah.
I'm not
It
quite
was
sure on that.
right around there. Billy would be able to tell us because that was the first product he ever did. But yeah, obviously those auto patch cards are definitely the chase of the product. Those are the cards you're looking for when you open a box. Yeah, and then the Golden Futures cards and the Program of Excellence inserts are again back, and those are definitely very much appreciated inserts and subset cards each year that people really look forward to adding to their collection. As far as some new content, there really isn't a whole lot, just because Team Canada Juniors has stayed pretty consistent, especially over the last few years, as far as what is included within it. That said, there are a few new things this year. For the Golden Futures insert set, there are now rose gold and white gold parallels for those cards. So just a couple added parallels to chase for that. And then for the Program of Excellence cards, there are now one-of-one finite parallels for those. So again, just a nice added chase card there. And then even though there have been the black signatures for the base set over the last few years, there are now one-of-one black signatures for the short printed base cards. So anything that's just a standard base card is still out of 5 for the black signatures. But those short print cards on the checklist, such as I think the draft picks and the draft prospects, guys like Alexi Lafreniere, Quentin Byfield, guys like that, their black signature cards are one-of-ones this year instead of being out of 5 like they would have been in previous years. So again, just a nice way to add some value into the product by having those one-of-one cards. As far as some analysis from me, I think the design of the base cards in general is just really nice. It's very clean. It always has been fairly patriotic, but I think there was a pretty heavy emphasis on using a maple leaf shape throughout the design, and I think it was just very well done and looks really nice as a whole, specifically on those auto patch cards that have kind of a gold color scheme with them. I think that just looks really nice with the design, and definitely a job well done on those. And then, like I mentioned, I think it's great to just have those one-of-one chase cards added into the product to just boost up the value and offer some really big time chase cards for people to go after and hopefully pull out of their box or case.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely another big product on the market. Maybe not with every collector, but I feel like it's kind of like taps into that niche market who really have a longing for these types of cards. I've always personally really liked to see national team cards, even going back to cards like from in the game. No matter the country, if a player is featured on his national team, for me, it always meant a little something extra. I'm sure for the players playing on that national stage, in some capacity, it's a very proud moment that they'll remember for their entire hockey careers. And just to get some kind of cardboard proof of that is always very nice. Just to confirm, the first Team Canada box product was in 2014-15. So we were definitely right on that. As far as the cards themselves, I've seen a little bit of it. It does look very nice as always. So, and of course, with the big draft class coming up, there'll be definitely some heavy cards, especially now more than ever, because we don't know when the next NHL season is going to start. And so from a value perspective, these cards are going to hold value that much longer because it'll take a couple more months here than usual for these guys to see themselves in an NHL jersey on, an NHL ice surface playing for their team. So these cards usually drop a little bit in value, but for now, they're going to stay at the value they come out of the box with, because there is going to be that delay between this Team Canada release and of course the start of the next NHL season, which is hopefully January 1st, but we'll see how that shapes up. As far as changes around the NHL, whether you're following on Twitter or Instagram or any media outlet, there has been, of course, a lot of movement in the hobby as far as the NHL goes and the players that make up these cards that we love to collect. And so we're just going to run down a couple of these big names that we feel need to be mentioned. We're not going to mention every name, so if you want a list, just go to NHL.com or something to get the full player movement list. But just to start off, for the players that we think that have recently been on the move, that will have some small or big changes to their hobby value. The first one that we noticed was Josh Anderson to Montreal, obviously heading to a market like Montreal, any Canadian market really, but especially Montreal is going to be a potentially a big spike in your hobby stock. If Montreal does go on a run, you can pretty much point to any player on their team during any sort of cup run with a Canadian team, and their hobby value is going to rise. And of course, depending on the player involved and their success with the team, it's going to mean that much more. So we feel like he's going to be one to watch as far as one that their hobby stock rises come next season. Another notable name is Jesse Pujärvi. He re-signed with Edmonton. Of course, they had his rights. And I believe we were talking about this before, but I think he came back from the KHL. I could be wrong, but obviously signing on with a team like Edmonton, again, another Canadian market team, playing with the likes of Connor McDavid, your hobby value is going to raise that much more. And of course, before he left the NHL to go back overseas to go play at home, his hobby value was to start not that bad. So there was definitely some big cards of his. Of course, it took a little bit of a tank when he left, but now that he's back with the same team that he originally debuted in the NHL with, that being the Edmonton Oilers, we feel if they find success, he could be a big part of that. And of course, his card prices would rise. Again, another Canadian market for the next two picks here. TJ Brody signs with Toronto. We definitely see that as a big spike in value potentially if Toronto, and I'm hoping as a Leafs fan, gets into gear and finds some success here, because whether it be TJ Brody or any regular Leafs fan, they definitely want to have success with the team. So we feel like, again, with Edmonton, any Toronto Maple Leafs player with any impact on their success will see a hobby rise. A renewed interest in this player. We're not sure if he has any collectors out there specifically, but definitely across the board, we can see his value rise. Getting to the goalies now, my favorite, Matt Murray to the Ottawa Senators. Matt Murray's a really interesting case because, of course, with Pittsburgh and his rise to fame with his 2 Stanley Cups, his value was quite high. Some would say probably the highest he's ever going to get. I would pretty much agree on that. But however, him moving to an interesting Ottawa market, his hobby market probably maybe a little bit consistent, maybe dips a little bit, because of course he's not on the team that his rookie cards are pictured in, that being the Pittsburgh Penguins. But again, if Ottawa finds success, I could see his value go up again to those Pittsburgh-like prices that he had when he found that success. So time will tell, and I don't think he will, but we put it on there as a possibility because he did have that value at the start of his career. And I know for a fact there are some pretty hardcore Matt Murray collectors out there, so you just never know with a guy like that, especially being a goalie. Speaking of goalies, Braden Holtby signs with Vancouver. He's been kind of up and down as far as his hobby goes, but he is moving to a Canadian market, and he has had some recent success, obviously, with the Capitals not too long ago. So, I would say he's about a middle of the road guy, if you're looking to collect him, but could see that value rise because of that Canadian market factor, and because Vancouver, I think they are on the way up, and seeing the recent value in Thatcher Demko and seeing how fans can quickly get on the bandwagon as far as Canucks goalies go. Braden Holtby definitely has potential to rise as well. And the guy he replaced, Jacob Markstrom, he signed with my new favorite, the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames as a team, I think they're kind of on the edge, depending on who you talk to. They could be on the way down or on the way up. But Jacob Markstrom signing for a 6-year deal. I'll let Flames tell you if that's a good deal or not. Could see his hobby value rise as well, just because, again, that Canadian market value. Yeah, so a lot of Canadian teams that I've listed here could see these players have that spike in value. And although it hasn't happened for, I think, 1993, Canadian team winning the Cup, if any of these teams do that, we definitely expect these guys to move the needle a little bit as far as their cards go. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the 2021 season and beyond. And last but not least, the non-Canadian market, for Brandon Saad from Chicago, I know Eric didn't really like the trade too much, but his hobby value definitely, I think, stays consistent because of the player he is. And coming from a Chicago fan place that, of course, does have that love for him, potentially wherever he goes. We'll see with Colorado. And they're kind of on the edge of something. Like, I would say Colorado is kind of like a Dallas for me. Like, they were a team that had a good couple pieces, but really couldn't put it together. And then, of course, Dallas this year finally did and made a cup final. I think Colorado could be that team to be in the final within the next 1 or 2 years here because they are kind of hitting their stride. And, of course, they have McKinnon there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what Colorado does as a team. But as far as Sod goes, we think it's going to stay consistent. But we'll have to see how it shakes up, like I said, in the 2021 season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think out of that list, I think obviously someone like Puyarvi is interesting just because he is staying within the same franchise that he had been with. And just to clarify, he was actually playing in the Liga in Finland, just back in his home country. But yeah, he had been over in Europe and wasn't happy with how he was being used. So because of that, his hobby value kind of dipped a little bit. But yeah, I think we definitely can see it definitely going back up to what it was at one point, just because he's back now and will definitely have an opportunity to be a big time contributor with Edmonton, especially if he finds, success playing alongside somebody like a McDavid or a Draisaitl. That could definitely help his value. Yeah, I think you pretty much summarized most of those guys pretty well. I would say with Saad, he's definitely had good value while he's been a Blackhawk. His value dropped when he went to Columbus, but then kind of went back up when he came back to Chicago again. I think his value will probably stay fairly consistent, but I think I could see it go up if they do have success as a team. And I really do think that the Avalanche are an up and coming team. If you look at their core, they're very much a group of players that are either kind of just starting to enter their prime or are in their prime. If you look at someone like a Gabe Landeskog, kind of more so in their prime at this point, but obviously you've got guys like McKinnon and Rantanen that are, even though they're elite players already, they're still probably on the way up. And then obviously you've got someone like Cale Makar on the back end. I think this will be a very high level team for a number of years moving forward. And I think someone like Saad is just a great fit with that team just because of his ability to play at a high speed. And that's kind of the game that Colorado plays offensively. So I think he'll fit in really well there. And obviously if he ends up lining up next to Nate McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen, his value could definitely go up, just on a personal standpoint, if his statistics, take an upturn and, if he's able to, put up, say, 25, 30 goals and put up a lot of assists with McKinnon and Rantanen, I think his value just individually could go up. But obviously anyone that's part of a cup winning team, their value is going to go up in the aftermath of that as well. And I think, like I mentioned, I think it's very, very realistic to see the Avalanche winning at least one, if not multiple cups in the next 5 years or so. I really like how their team is put together, and I think there's a lot of potential there for them. So those are kind of the guys that we feel like will either go up or stay fairly consistent as far as big names that have moved in the last week or so. But we wanted to touch on guys that maybe, their value might go down as a result of a move over this last week. And we've got 5 names on that list. Starting off with Max Domi. He's probably one of the more interesting names on this list just because he's going from Montreal to Columbus. So obviously, as far as the market itself goes, it's not nearly as large of a market, and there just isn't that same hobby value in Columbus as there is in Montreal. But what's interesting with Domi is that he's obviously going to have a much better opportunity on the ice with the Blue Jackets. He's probably going to have a chance to be that second line center that, Montreal just really didn't give him that chance. I think when Domi first went to Montreal, obviously his hobby value went way up, having come from Arizona. But then just with the struggles that he had in Montreal, just not really being given the role that he would really excel in, that kind of hurt his value to some extent. And it'll be interesting to see. And Columbus is a really interesting team too that, definitely has that upside and ability to be a cup contender. I don't know that they're quite there yet. I mean, I wouldn't put them on the same level as Colorado right now, but they're definitely an interesting team, and you can never count them out. So, having someone like Domi added into that team definitely could make a difference for them. So it'll be an interesting thing to just keep an eye on him and how he might do on the ice as well as just in the hobby. Another really interesting one that we were talking about at length before this is Henrik Lundqvist going to the Washington Capitals. Personally, I don't think his hobby stock is really going to drop that much, just because, he's so well respected and everyone knows, what Henrik Lundqvist has done in his career. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. I think he's been an elite goalie throughout his career, so I feel like his value is pretty well established at this point. That said, I mean, you could make the argument that, he is going to a smaller, less desirable market with the Capitals than he was, when he was a Ranger all these years. So in a way, just on paper, it seems like it might drop a little bit, but at the same time, you could also see kind of that novelty aspect of it, of, oh, like it's a Henrik Lundqvist Washington Capitals card. Like that's just so different. We're not used to seeing that. So like, yeah, I want a Lundqvist Capitals card. Like that's cool. Kind of, I mean, really quite similar to when Marty Brodeur went to the St. Louis Blues. It's just so different and just weird to see that you say, even though this is really just kind of wrong, like it's just cool to have a card of him, with the Blues. So I think you could kind of see that component of it factor in, and people actually do really aggressively pursue Lundqvist Capitals cards just because of kind of the novelty aspect of it. I don't think it'll be quite like how Marc-Andre Fleury was going to Vegas, where he obviously really regained his hobby value once he went to the Golden Knights. I don't see that happening with Lundqvist, even though he definitely has a better chance of winning a Stanley Cup with the Capitals than he would have with the Rangers, given that he probably wouldn't have been playing much at all this coming season if he stayed in New York. So on a personal level, he has a better opportunity for success on the ice. But as far as hobby value, who knows? But yeah, I don't see it going down too much, just because of how respected and established he already is. And then three other names real quick, just to touch on. Torrey Krug going to St. Louis Blues from the Boston Bruins, going to a lesser market in St. Louis. So I think that'll probably hurt his hobby value a little bit. Another one that is close to my heart is Corey Crawford going from Chicago to New Jersey. New Jersey is not the biggest market in the hobby. So I think his hobby value will go down, as well as just the fact that he's probably not going to be the outright starter in New Jersey. They might end up doing kind of a tandem, 1A, 1B with Mackenzie Blackwood and Crawford. But yeah, I think that'll hurt his value. And then another player going to New Jersey is Andreas Janssen from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So obviously going from a hockey hotbed market in Toronto to New Jersey is going to hurt a player's value. So yeah, I would say that Andreas Janssen's hobby value is definitely going to head downward from here. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like Aaron said at the top, there are a ton of other players that have been on the move over the last week, whether that be by trade or just signing as a free agent. But those were kind of the top 12 guys or so that we thought there would be some potentially big hobby implications for their value one way or another. So we just wanted to highlight that. And then transitioning into a topic that we've kind of wanted to talk about, and we've touched on it a little bit in the past, but we haven't really spent a lot of devoted time to it. And that would be, what do you do as a collector when your player is either traded or signed somewhere else as a free agent? And that's something that both Aaron and myself have had to deal with throughout our time collecting. For myself, obviously, Nicholas Hjalmarsson was traded to the Arizona Coyotes in 2017. And, Jonas Enroth ended up kind of being a bit of a journeyman goalie as his career progressed. So that's a question that we both definitely had to answer for ourselves. Aaron, do you just want to kind of take the ball and run with that question a little bit?
Yeah. It's always weird when a player that we collect, I mean, like, let's face it, like, we are so invested in these players, maybe not their lives, but as far as like what they do on the ice, it's important. We're pretty jazzed up when they have a good game. Maybe if they're, if the fans are calling for their head, it might not be such a great time. But we kind of live and breathe through these players and their hobby and their hockey accomplishments, that hopefully that translate a little bit to our kind of hobby accomplishments as far as collectors of these players. So it's always a little weird when a player that we have potentially, depending on who you collect, grown up cheering for these players in these uniforms, and then they get traded. Or maybe even the team just lets them go for nothing or something like that. And it's always a really weird time, especially as collectors as well, because we've already not only backed these players on the ice, but we've backed them kind of on the sidelines as well, and financially have potentially invested, a certain amount of money into these players. And so it's always a little strange, and sometimes for some collectors, like sometimes infuriating when the player is moved. As far as my own collection, my first big experience with that was way back in the day with Ed Belfour, actually. He was, of course, dealt to Toronto many years ago. And being a huge Toronto fan my entire life, and being a huge Belfour fan, that was like a match made in heaven for sure. Him coming to Toronto was like a dream. And it was awesome collecting his cards at the time. I was a kid, so of course I couldn't go after every Toronto card, but I definitely have a few cards that I hold near and dear to my heart of Belfour pictured as a Maple Leaf. And not only as a fan, but as a card collector, these cards definitely do it for me. So when he was dealt to Florida, it was especially, like I think I was like 12 or 13 or something. And that was a big deal for me at the time, just personally. It sucked having your favorite goalie from your hometown team traded away. It really sucked. But, as I get older, you kind of know that that's how it is. It's a business, and sometimes, unfortunately, teams need to make business decisions. And but as the hobby goes, I don't think I've actually purposely bought a Florida Panthers Ed Belfour card, even to this day, because at the time I pretty much denounced them and just would not pick them up at all. And although there have been, to be honest, there have been a couple awesome Florida Panthers cards with him on it. So I think I might have to cave one day, now that I'm older and more mature, and actually pick up a nice looking Florida Panthers card of Ed Belfour. So who knows? But yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to it now. But definitely at the time, it was pretty much a dead stop to the collection for the most part, unfortunately, because I had a blast collecting Belfour cards. And yeah, so the trade, unfortunately, or his signing in Florida definitely did do that. But that was when I was collecting more. I mean, it's always been a hobby, but I was a young kid then, so you couldn't really go all out with it. But as far as my player collecting goes, as far as super collecting, like we'll get into the differences, I'm sure, in a different episode. But as far as my super collecting goes, which I'm sure you guys know a thing or two about that, with Jonas Enroth, it was kind of like a blessing in disguise, because I collected him with the full knowledge that, someday I kind of wanted to super collect him. And of course, him starting on a team like Buffalo, one that I personally didn't have any connection with, it was very easy to collect him on whichever team he went, whether it be Dallas, he had a couple cards with them, LA, and then even back to Toronto, like kind of coming full circle. He actually signed with the Maple Leafs, which was awesome at the time. And he actually did get a couple sweet Leaf cards before, of course, being sent down and all that. Didn't have a good showing. Well, personally, I think he played well, but of course, the numbers don't show that all the time. But of course, that being the unfortunate end to his NHL career with the Toronto Maple Leafs under Mike Babcock. And but after that, for me, there was no doubt I was going to still keep collecting his cards, whether it be previous cards or even some Leaf cards that I needed. I was definitely going to pick those up, even though that was the unfortunate last stop to his career. And even nowadays, like since then, he had signed in the KHL, and I knew for sure he was going to get some sweet cards over there. And, I've been fortunate to pick up quite a few. And no matter where he goes, no matter what his career stats look like or what have you, I'm still going to collect his cards. And so for me at the trade deadline, it was never really a factor as far as super collecting a guy from day one. But for some guys, especially some big hardcore player collectors, it definitely could see an impact. Like I remember when, not my collection, but with PK Subban was dealt, unfortunately, and he had left Montreal. I remember a bunch of collectors just unloading his stuff. It always made me feel quite sad when I feel that other collectors have so much to gain in their collections if they were to only follow a guy throughout their career. And then I think at the end of the day, it makes for a much more fun collection, I think, because you can scroll through the years and see their cards on different teams. I always found that fun, when I look back on my collection. And so it's always kind of, you kind of root for the collector when a guy gets traded. You hope that he'll still collect his cards. But, at the end of the day, it's not up to us. It's up to them as a collector. But it's always fun when you see a guy collect a guy, no matter what happens, whether they get traded or, they get sent down, or whether they're playing great or not so great. But yeah, for me, it's always been, I will collect that player as far as my super collection goes, no matter where he goes. And as far as my career in this hobby and any super collections that will follow from here on out, I definitely collect with the mantra, if you will, no matter where this player goes, I'm going to still collect their cards. So the trade deadline has been emotional, I think, for a lot of people, especially a lot of hobbyists. But for me, it's always, when I can, try to stay the course as far as tradings or signings.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty similar for myself as well. Obviously with like I mentioned, Jalmerson going from the Blackhawks, which have always been my favorite team growing up. Him leaving and going to Arizona was definitely very disappointing for myself. Just from a fan standpoint, losing him from my favorite team and having him go kind of to a wasteland, so to speak, out in the desert. I know we have some Coyotes fans listening, so no offense to you guys or anything, but obviously just going to Arizona is not necessarily the greatest thing for a guy's hobby value and collectability. So that was just frustrating for me. But like Aaron mentioned, I think it's honestly kind of nice actually to have that happen, because it's just adding that diversity to your collection. So, I think just keeping that in mind, even though you might be frustrated and disappointed that the guy that you like and collect, has moved on, presumably from your favorite team or just anywhere he is, you might feel disappointed that he's moved on, but I think it's good to just stick it out. Hopefully you are liking and collecting the player and not just, oh, this is a guy on my favorite team or whatever it might be. Hopefully you're collecting the player because you like the player himself. And, if you're collecting a player just because he's on your favorite team and you don't necessarily have a whole lot of draw to that specific player, it can definitely be easier for you to move on from them pretty quickly if they are moved. I've seen that happen regularly. Guys will just collect the big name rookie each year from their team, and then a couple years later they get traded, and oh yeah, well he's not here anymore, so why would I want his cards anymore? Which to an extent makes sense, but it's also kind of frustrating, like Aaron said, just to see that time and investment that someone put into that collection just kind of go to waste. So I think just as far as we're concerned, we like seeing people collect a player because they really like the player themselves, as opposed to just because of the team that they play for. So, I think we have the same mentality on that, and sticking with your player no matter where they go. In Aaron's case, that might even mean that, they end up leaving North America and go play in Europe to finish out their career. And that's another awesome way to add some diversity to your collection. I don't think Aaron would have ever gotten super involved with the European card market, if Jonas Enroth didn't go over there. So
No chance.
yeah, I know I probably wouldn't have. I have some European cards of Derek Whitmore. He went over to Europe a couple times throughout his career. And it's cool to just have kind of those more obscure cards that we just don't get to see all that often over here in North America. So just being able to add some cool pieces like that to your collection is definitely nice and just adds that diversity, like I mentioned. I don't know if you've had it happen, Aaron, but I have had it happen where a player that I collect has been traded, and I actually have said, you know what, I'm probably going to move the collection. And the case for me where that happened is I was a pretty big fan of Blake Jeffrion, who was a prospect in the Nashville Predators system. And of course, a lot of you guys probably recognize either his name, or at the very least, I'm sure you guys probably recognize the last name, because Blake was the grandson of Boom Boom Jeffrion. And so obviously that, kind of helped establish his hobby value, even with the Predators. But then fairly early on to in Jeffrion's career, he was traded to the Montreal Canadiens, which, like we kind of talked about earlier, going to Montreal is probably going to help your hobby value as it is anyway, just because of the nature of the market. But when you're a fourth generation Montreal Canadian player, that's the only time it's ever happened in NHL history. And to have all four of those generations having played for the Canadians, obviously Blake Geoffrion's hobby value just skyrocketed as soon as he went to Montreal. And I had a pretty decent collection of his. I mean, it wasn't like every single card by any means, but it was definitely pretty solid. I was still fairly young at the time. I would have been in high school, and it got to the point where I just said, I like Blake Geoffrion, I really do, but there's no way I can keep this collection because of how valuable these cards have become pretty much overnight. So I kind of took advantage of the situation and got out of that collection and sold really high. And, that was kind of that. I kept a few cards, not necessarily by choice per se, but just because I wasn't able to move them or, whatever it might have been, but did have a few of the cards left over. And then, unfortunately, his career got ended very prematurely with a pretty freak injury during the 12-13 lockout in the AHL. So that immediately ended his career and he retired. And of course, with that, his hobby value plummeted after that. And since then, I've actually been able to pick up a decent number of cards back. I wouldn't say that I actively collect him by any means. I've probably only added, I don't know, one or two cards of his over the last handful of years. But yeah, that's just one instance where, I said, okay, even though I do like collecting him and I do like the player, it doesn't make sense for me to hang on to it because he wasn't my primary focus. I mean, I obviously had Nick Hjalmarsson, who was my primary focus in the hobby and still is. Yeah, it definitely would have been different if Blake Geoffrion is my guy, period. But because that was kind of
Yeah.
a secondary collection, and just because of the nature of just how much value his cards gained pretty much overnight, it just didn't make sense for me to hang on to those and continue to pursue those cards. And that was actually during his rookie card season of 11-12. So most of his rookie year cards are pictured with the Nashville Predators, but he does have some that are pictured with the Montreal Canadiens, including some of the higher end releases. I know some of his cards from the Cup are pictured with the Montreal Canadiens. So those obviously, had some pretty good value at that time. But yeah, so that's just one example of where I moved on from a guy, even though I have kind of picked up a lot of those cards back in the time since. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is we just like seeing people stick with those collections and embracing the opportunity to diversify your collection a little bit and just enjoy it in that way. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we stand on it. If you're a collector of any of the guys that have been moved in this past week, we would just encourage you guys to stick with your player. It's definitely disheartening to see your guy moved, especially if he's been on your favorite team or if he's been on the same team for his entire career. Say someone like a Henrik Lundqvist, that's just a New York Rangers icon, and now he's not.
Those guys are going to feel it. They're going to feel it real hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It really is. It's difficult to overcome that mentally and just say, I got to keep going with it. I remember the day that Nick Hjalmarsson was traded to the Coyotes in 2017. I had the thoughts in my head of like, man, like, what does this mean for my collection? Like, this kind of sucks. Like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this or, and then of course, after having those very reactionary thoughts, in the heat of the moment, it's like, no, of course I'm still going to collect them. Like, why would I not?
Here's a quick question. Sorry to interrupt, but you were talking about Geoffrion's value and how he wasn't your guy at the time, so you kind of had to sell. He wasn't your main guy. If that happened, if a similar scenario happened with Hjalmarsson, where, he becomes this playoff hero, he scores the cup-winning goal, like all this stuff, and his hobby value absolutely explodes, like to the moon. Would you consider just selling out and getting rid of every single card?
Yeah,
I know it's a tough question, but I brought this up because I had thoughts when Jonas Enroth was signed to Toronto, and I had all these daydreams of Enroth, coming in the playoffs. Anderson was injured or something, and then going on to lead the Leafs to their Stanley Cup, and him hoisting the cup with the Leafs, and how epic that would have been. But at the same time, my collection would have been worth like billions. So that, of course, never happened and never will. but I did have those thoughts about like what would I do. But yeah, I'm just wondering technically like where would you be on that if that were to happen?
Yeah, it's a great question.
It's fun to think about.
It is. And I think that's definitely a question that a lot of people have had to consider over the years. And for myself, I would say to me that honestly, I wouldn't even consider that. I would more just be proud that, I have a really sweet collection of, now an iconic player at that point.
Right.
That said, what I have done in the past after the Blackhawks had won a Stanley Cup, whether that be in 2010, 13, or 15, not to brag at all, but they were pretty darn good for a few years, even though they're going to be miserable, for the next few years.
Hey man, you
Um,
got your cups. Just be
I
like as a
know,
Leafs fan, you got your cups. So just it could be worse.
I
Signed every Leafs fan.
I know. You're right. You're right. But anyway, after they would win a cup, what I would do is if I had any doubles or triples or whatever it might be of a more desirable card, I would sell those in the aftermath just because of that heightened value for the player. And Jalmerson specifically, primarily earlier in his career, but he just didn't have a lot of cards. So, if you had a pretty scarce card of his and they won the cup, the value for those cards were definitely really solid in the aftermath of them winning the Stanley Cup. I know at one point I had 2 copies of his Artifacts Gold Spectrum Rookie out of 5. And I,
Oh, those cards were beautiful. I've never owned one in hand. I've always wanted one, but I have the rest of the rainbow, and those cards are just amazing.
yeah, they are. And I'm pretty sure I sold one in the aftermath of the 2010 Cup victory, just because generally speaking, I'm not really a hoarder for my player collections. I do for some specific cards, but in general, I'm perfectly content just having one copy of any given
Like
card.
one and done. Like
Right.
rare or not, just one, and that's it.
Exactly. I mean, there are cases where sometimes just kind of by how it goes, I might end up picking up multiple copies of a card by choice, but
Like the 2015 gold script out of 100 by chance that I still need for my collection. It's no big deal.
you're
We'll
not
move
salty.
on. We'll move on.
You're not salty at all. Um,
Now,
yeah, that was funny. But yeah, anyway, going back to the point, I did capitalize on that, just saying, I'm perfectly content if I just have one copy of the card. So if I'm able to sell off a double or a triple and take advantage of that high value at the time, I don't mind doing that at all. Not a big deal. But to answer the original question, would I ever just sell off a collection because a guy scored a cup winning goal or won the Conn Smythe or whatever it might be? The answer to that question is definitely no. For Jalmerson, Slavin, Dzingel, guys like that, there's just no way I would do that. But yeah, it's understandable why people do. If your guys value, doubles or triples or even more than that, seemingly overnight, it can be very difficult to say no to that opportunity.
especially a card like an RPA, like if you're hanging on to an RPA of a guy and you're looking at like, hey, I can get 5, 6 times the value, especially a card that's high end but very readily available. If a guy has one or two of the RPAs, for example, he could sell off one or both copies and be fully confident that he's going to be able to pick up, maybe not that exact copy, but fairly confident that he's going to be able to pick up an RPA from the cup, for example, in the future, in a year or two for a bargain price. So some guys do that, not full on selling out, but a card or two here or there could definitely be worth your while for player collectors who do have a couple copies.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really never my intention with the Jeffrey on collection when I did sell them off. I was kind of just content with the decision of, it just financially doesn't make sense for me to keep this collection just because of the value of the cards that, they now have, as far as what I own currently, but also just, the fact that picking anything up new at that point would have cost more than it did previously. So, at that point, I was content with just saying, that's all right. It's not, he's not my main guy. And it just makes sense for me to get out and capitalize on the opportunity while I can. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, his career came to a very premature end. And I was able to pick up a lot of those cards back for pennies on the dollar, which was nice, obviously, for myself to be able to build up a nice collection of him again. But yeah, the original intention when I sold those cards was, that's it. I'm done with him, and I was fine with that. But yeah, for my main guys at this point, I would say I'm definitely in it for the long haul.
It's always nice to see that, especially as card collectors. Like I love looking at cards. And so when someone shares with me a collection of their player and I scroll through it and they have this or maybe one picture of all these highlights of their collection, it's always fun to see, that chronological order, like almost like a collection like of their career on the ice in their cards, from their rookie season to, their final season, and seeing that display of cardboard throughout the years. It's always really fun, and seeing the different designs coupled with, the different patch colors, if they've moved around once or twice. It's always nice to see visually, like as a collection. So it's always nice to see when people continue those collections moving forward. I understand why people don't, but it's always nice to see. So if anyone's out there right now who are considering it, I would say give it like a week or two, maybe even a month, maybe even longer than that, just to get your bearings straight first. Because obviously, any kind of big free agent signing, if your guy goes to UFA or if he gets traded, is obviously a big deal. And it's a big deal for your collections as well. But I would say just don't make any decisions right away. Just give it some time. Maybe even wait until they start playing again to see them on the ice with their new team, although it might look kind of weird at first. Just give it some time and see what they can do for the new team. I mean, maybe they're in a smaller pond, so they're, that big fish on the team, so they're able to carry more of the weight, and also make a difference on the ice. So I think that's really important, and you could see yourself maybe in your PC guy getting more screen time, and that could be really cool when watching some games. So yeah, that new role is going to be exciting for them as players personally, probably, but also for your collection. It's definitely nice to see a new avenue of your collection. And so we both definitely encourage you guys to stick with those player collections for the long haul there. So yeah, definitely a really fun / controversial topic to talk about within the hobby, especially when there's a big move. But that's the way it goes sometimes. Speaking of big moves, well, not really a big move, but a big transition. Alexis Lafreniere is going to be making his debut. Well, we don't know when that would be, but when he does, he will be probably the new King of New York. So that'll be definitely a big splash in the hobby once he gets there. But before he does, I received a package from Upper Deck the other day, just kind of signaling the start of some of their contests that they have for their Collect Alexis campaign. And I received some sweet goodies from Upper Deck. And so we're going to give away the Upper Deck hoodie and the tumbler mug. So whenever Eric is ready, we're just going to do the draw. And we had a bunch of entries from across Twitter, Instagram, on some of our awesome followers. So we're just going to do a quick draw for those winners. And yeah, definitely good luck. So we're going to draw one name, and they are going to pick whether they want the hoodie or the tumbler mug, and then the person who is in second place will get the item that first place does not want. So yeah, definitely some sweet items up for grabs, and yeah, good luck to everyone who entered.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'll be a great way for you guys, whoever the lucky winners are, to start off their Alexio offer on your collections, and they're definitely both very nice pieces for sure. So yeah, good luck to everyone that entered. We're grateful to see the number of entrants and having you guys interact with us in that way. Like Aaron said, there will be two winners. We just wanted to give two people the opportunity to get something rather than just one person. So like Aaron said, I've just got a list of all of the people who entered into the contest, and I will randomize that list 3 times using random.org. And whoever's name is on top, like Aaron said, will have the option between the 2 items, and then whoever's second will get the remaining item. And if you guys are one of the winners, please just reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and we'll get your items sent out. We won't be publicly announcing the winner on any of the social media accounts, just because we want people to tune in and listen to this, obviously. So if whoever wins doesn't reach out to us maybe in the next week or two, we'll probably come hunt you down and make sure that you get your items. But yeah, good luck everybody, like we said, and I've got the names all entered into random.org, and I will get the randomizing underway here. Like I said, I will do it 3 times. So first random, and second random, and the final random to determine the winners. So the person who has the option between choosing the hoodie and the tumbler mug is Chris Hurt. And Chris, just reach out to us. Let us know which item you want. Just to clarify, I know we posted it when we announced the contest. The hoodie is an adult size small. So if that factors into your decision at all, just keep that in mind. And then second place, who will be receiving the other item that Chris does not choose, is the golden pole on Instagram. So both of you guys just reach out to us and we'll get your information. And absolutely congratulations to both of you guys for winning some cool stuff. And thank you to everybody else who entered. We appreciate that interaction with us and hope you guys enjoy the sweet stuff that you're getting.
Yeah, definitely really cool that we're even able to offer you these giveaways. Big shout out to Upper Deck on that. Hopefully we can definitely have some more giveaways for you guys in the future, but definitely stay tuned on that. As far as what we want to hear from you guys today, just some simple questions. Has a player that you collected ever been traded or signed on with a new team? If they did, how did you react? And what was the end result with your collection? Did you stay the course or did you end up breaking up that collection? Has your favorite team made any notable moves over the last week or so? Are you happy with the moves? Why or why not? So definitely stay tuned for those questions out on social media as always, and definitely keep an eye out.
Yeah, it's obviously been a very exciting last week or so, and
especially for the goalies.
Yeah, it's been crazy with the goalie carousel, and there's still pieces that need to be moved. Obviously, Marc-Andre Fleury will be looking for a new home, presumably. So not concerned at all that our good friend Kendall will obviously be continuing his Fleury collection either way. But it'll be cool to see, where Fleury ends up. Kind of unfortunate that his time in Vegas presumably will be ending this way. But it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I know there's been some conversation that he could actually end up back in Pittsburgh, which would be kind of cool to bookend his career like that. But even though as we referenced, there's already been some pretty big names on the move, there are definitely still quite a few big names that are yet to land in their new homes. Taylor Hall, Alex Pietrangelo, among others. So, and we're recording this on Saturday, October 10th. So by the time this comes out, some of those names could have already landed somewhere else. But that's going to do it for episode 16. Please be sure to follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Center Ice Cardcast, and on Twitter at Center Ice CC. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Center Ice Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.